My name is Walter Stevens, and I'm 69 years old, sitting here in my Memphis home that had become a prison because I can't step outside without neighbors pointing and whisper about the viral video my own daughter posted on social media, claiming that I sexually abused her as a child, a horrific lie she fabricated purely for revenge after I refused to give her money for drugs one final time. 8 months ago, I was a respected retired teacher with a spotless reputation built over 40 years of working with children. But today I'm branded as a monster in my own community because my drug-addicted daughter decided that destroying my life was easier than facing her addiction. I'd love to know where you're listening from today, so please share your location in the comments below. And if this story touches your heart, I hope you'll consider subscribing, because what happened to me shows how quickly a false accusation can destroy an innocent person's entire life, and how social media can spread lies faster than the truth can catch up. Let me start by telling you who I really am, so you can understand the magnitude of the lie that has destroyed my reputation and my peace of mind. For 40 years, I taught elementary school children in Memphis, dedicating my life to education and helping young minds grow and develop. I was known throughout the school district as a patient, kind teacher who went above and beyond to help struggling students and support families in need. I never married and had children in the traditional sense, but I consider myself blessed to have influenced thousands of children throughout my career. Former students would often return as adults to thank me for the impact I had on their lives, and many credited me with inspiring their love of learning or helping them through difficult periods in their childhood. In 1995, when I was 41 years old, I made the decision to adopt 7-year-old Jessica from a foster care system. Jessica had been through multiple placements and had experienced trauma and neglect that had left her angry, defiant, and struggling to trust adults. Social workers warned me that adopting an older child with her background would be challenging, but I felt called to provide a stable, loving home for a child who needed one. The early years with Jessica were indeed difficult, as she tested boundaries and struggled with behavioral issues that stemmed from her traumatic early childhood. She had difficulty in school, problems with authority figures, and a tendency toward destructive behavior when she felt frustrated or overwhelmed. But I was patient and consistent, providing the structure and unconditional love that she desperately needed. I invested everything I had in helping Jessica heal and thrive. I paid for therapy, tutoring, and specialized programs designed to help children who had experienced trauma. I attended every school meeting, every therapy session, and every court hearing related to the adoption process. I sacrificed my social life, my financial security, and my personal comfort to ensure that Jessica had every opportunity to succeed. For several years, it seemed like my efforts were paying off. Jessica's grades improved, her behavior stabilized, and she began to form healthy relationships with teachers and peers. She participated in school activities, made friends, and seemed to be developing into a confident, capable young woman. I was proud of her progress and optimistic about her future. But when Jessica entered her teenage years, old patterns began to resurface with greater intensity. She became increasingly rebellious, skipping school, staying out past curfew, and associated with older teenagers who were involved in risky behaviors. She began experimenting with alcohol and marijuana, despite my attempt to set boundaries and provide guidance. I tried everything I could think of to help Jessica navigate her teenage years successfully. I arranged for additional counseling, enrolled her in after-school programs, and attempted to maintain open communication about the challenges she was facing. But Jessica seemed determined to reject any authority or structure, viewing my rules and expectations as oppressive rather than protective. The situation became more serious when Jessica was caught shoplifting at 16 and was arrested for underage drinking at 17. Each incident was followed by promises to change and do better, but the pattern of destructive behavior continued to escalate despite my efforts to provide support and consequences. When Jessica turned 18, she decided to move out of my house and live with friends who were also struggling with substance abuse and legal problems. I was heartbroken, but hoped that experiencing independence and natural consequences might motivate her to make better choices. I continued to offer support and assistance whenever she asked for help. Over the next several years, Jessica's life became increasingly chaotic and unstable. She dropped out of community college, lost multiple jobs, and began using harder drugs including cocaine and methamphetamine. She would disappear for weeks at a time, then reappear asking for money, food, or a place to stay when her current living situation fell through. I struggled with how to help Jessica without enabling her destructive behavior. I provided assistance when she seemed genuinely motivated to change, paid for treatment programs, and always welcomed her home when she expressed a desire to get clean and rebuild her life. But each attempt at sobriety was short-lived, and Jessica always returned to the lifestyle that was slowly destroying her. The pattern of Jessica's requests for help became more frequent and desperate as her addiction progressed. She would call at all hours asking for money for rent, food, or medication, always with urgent explanations about why she needed immediate assistance. When I questioned her about how she was spending money or whether she was using drugs, she would become angry and accuse me of not trusting her or caring about her well-being. I gave Jessica thousands of dollars over the years, money that I knew was probably being used to buy drugs, but that I hoped might keep her safe or provide her with basic necessities. I paid for apartments that she was evicted from, cars that were repossessed, and treatment programs that she left early. Each financial gift was accompanied by hope that this time might be different. But Jessica's addiction continued to worsen, and her behavior became more manipulative and desperate. She would create elaborate stories about emergencies or opportunities that required immediate financial assistance. She would promise to pay me back or to use the money responsibly, but these promises were never kept. The relationship between Jessica and me became increasingly strained as her addiction consumed more of her life and energy. She would be loving and grateful when I provided assistance, but angry and hostile when I asked questions or expressed concerns about her lifestyle. Our interactions became transactional rather than genuinely affectionate, focused on her immediate needs rather than building a healthy relationship. By 2020, I had begun to realize that my financial support was enabling Jessica's addiction rather than helping her recover. Friends, family members, and addiction counselors all advised me to stop giving her money and to force her to face the natural consequences of her choices. But the thought of cutting off support felt like abandoning my daughter when she needed help most. The final confrontation came in March 2023, when Jessica called asking for $2,000 to cover what she claimed were legal fees related to a drug possession charge. She insisted that without this money, she would go to jail and lose her job and apartment. She begged me to help her one more time, promising that this would be the last time she would ask for financial assistance. But I had heard similar promises many times before, and I had reached a point where I could no longer afford to continue supporting Jessica's addiction. My retirement savings were depleted. My credit cards were maxed out, and I was struggling to cover my own basic expenses. I told Jessica that I couldn't give her any more money, and that she needed to find other solutions to her problems. Jessica's reaction was immediate and explosive. She became furious, accusing me of never really loving her and of abandoning her when she needed me most. She said that adoptive parents who really care about their children would never refuse help in a crisis, and that my refusal proved that I had never wanted her in the first place. When I tried to explain my financial situation and my belief that continued financial support was harming rather than helping her, Jessica became even more angry. She accused me of being selfish and cruel, and she threatened to make me sorry for refusing to help her. I thought her threats were just emotional outbursts from someone who was desperate and disappointed. I had no idea that Jessica was planning the most devastating revenge imaginable. 2 weeks after our confrontation, Jessica posted a video on Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram that would destroy my life completely. In the video, she claimed that I had sexually abused her throughout her childhood, and that the trauma from this abuse had led to her struggles with addiction and mental health issues. Jessica's video was emotional and convincing, with tears and detailed stories about alleged incidents of abuse that never happened. She spoke about feeling trapped and afraid as a child, about being molested by the man who was supposed to protect her, and about years of suffering in silence because she was afraid no one would believe her. The video went viral within hours, shared thousands of times by people who were outraged by Jessica's story and supportive of her courage in speaking out against her alleged abuser. Comments poured in from strangers expressing sympathy for Jessica and condemnation for the monster who had supposedly hurt an innocent child. I first learned about the video when my neighbor Mrs. Patterson called to ask if I had seen what Jessica had posted online. When I watched the video, I was shocked and horrified by the accusations Jessica was making. Every detail was fabricated. Every incident was a lie. But Jessica's performance was so convincing that even I might have believed her if I hadn't known the truth. Within hours of the video being posted, my phone began ringing with calls from former colleagues, students, and community members who had seen Jessica's accusations. Some called to express shock and disbelief. Others to ask if the allegations were true, and a few to tell me that they were cutting all contact with me until the situation was resolved. The viral nature of Jessica's video meant that the accusations spread far beyond my immediate circle of friends and acquaintances. Local news stations picked up the story, presenting it as an example of child abuse and the long-term trauma that victims carry into adulthood. My name and photograph were broadcast on television and published in newspapers, identifying me as Jessica's alleged abuser. I immediately contacted an attorney to explore my options for fighting Jessica's false accusations, but I was told that proving defamation would be difficult and expensive, especially when the accusations involved child sexual abuse. The attorney explained that even false allegations of this nature are often believed by the public, and that my reputation might never fully recover even if I could prove my innocence. The social consequences of Jessica's accusations were swift and devastating. Former students who had maintained contact with me over the years stopped calling and unfriended me on social media. Neighbors began avoiding eye contact and crossing the street when they saw me. The grocery store where I had shopped for decades became a gauntlet of stares, whispers, and hostile looks. I received hundreds of threatening messages from strangers who had seen Jessica's video and believed her accusations. People called me names, threatened violence, and told me that I deserved to die for what I had supposedly done to an innocent child. Someone spray-painted child molester on my garage door, and my mailbox was vandalized repeatedly. The harassment extended beyond online threats to real-world consequences that made it dangerous for me to leave my house. I was confronted in the pharmacy by a woman who recognized me from news coverage and began screaming about how people like me should be locked up forever. At the bank, the teller treated me with obvious disgust and handled my transaction with gloved hands, as if I were contaminated. The Memphis City School District, where I had worked for 4 decades, issued a statement distancing themselves from me and expressing support for any victims of abuse who came forward. Former colleagues who had worked alongside me for years made public statements about being shocked by the allegations and about the importance of believing survivors of abuse. The most painful part of the ordeal was losing relationships with people who had known me for decades and should have understood that I was incapable of the crimes Jessica was describing. Longtime friends stopped returning my calls. Former students who had credited me with changing their lives began questioning their memories of our interactions, and even family members expressed doubts about my innocence. I became a prisoner in my own home, afraid to venture out because of the hostility and harassment I faced in public. Grocery shopping became an ordeal requiring careful timing to avoid crowds, and I stopped attending church services because of the uncomfortable stares and whispered conversations that followed my arrival. The isolation and stress of being falsely accused of such horrific crimes took a severe toll on my physical and mental health. I developed anxiety and depression that required medication, and I struggled with insomnia and panic attacks that made daily functioning difficult. The weight loss from stress and loss of appetite made me look ill and fragile, which only seemed to confirm people's suspicions about my guilt. For months, I lived in this nightmare of false accusations and social ostracism, with no way to prove my innocence or restore my reputation. Jessica had successfully destroyed my life with her lies, and there seemed to be no path back to respect and acceptance I had once enjoyed in my community. But 8 months after Jessica's initial video, something happened that would begin to expose the truth and vindicate my innocence. Jessica was arrested for drug possession and theft, and during questioning by police, she made statements that contradicted key details in her abuse allegations. The inconsistencies were significant enough to raise questions about her credibility. More importantly, Jessica's cellmate in jail came forward with information that Jessica had bragged about lying in her viral video to get revenge on her adoptive father for refusing to give her money. The cellmate, who had no connection to me or reason to lie, provided a sworn statement describing Jessica's admission that she had fabricated the abuse allegations. This new evidence prompted a detective to reopen the investigation into Jessica's claims and to examine them more critically. The detective discovered numerous inconsistencies in Jessica's story, including timeline problems and descriptions of incidents that couldn't have occurred given the documented fact about my life and work schedule. The detective also interviewed Jessica's former therapists, teachers, and social workers, none of whom had any record of her reporting or showing signs of sexual abuse during her childhood. Medical records from her pediatric care showed no evidence of abuse, and school records indicated that she had never made any allegations or displayed concerning behaviors that would suggest trauma. Most significantly, the detective found evidence that Jessica had researched false allegation cases online and had crafted her story using details from other people's experiences rather than from her own memories. Digital evidence showed that she had visited websites about child abuse and had downloaded materials about how to create convincing victim testimonies. When confronted with this evidence, Jessica eventually admitted that she had lied about the abuse allegations. She confessed that she had been angry about my refusal to give her money and had wanted to hurt me in the most devastating way possible. She acknowledged that her accusations were completely false and that I had never abused her in any way. Jessica's confession was covered by the same news outlets that had reported her original allegations, but the coverage of her admission received far less attention than her initial accusations. While some people in my community learned the truth and began to treat me with more respect, many others never heard about Jessica's confession or chose to continue believing the original accusations. The damage to my reputation in my life has been largely irreversible, despite Jessica's admission that she lied. Once someone is publicly accused of child sexual abuse, suspicion and doubt tend to linger even after the accusations are proven false. Some people assume that where there's smoke, there must be fire, and that Jessica's confession might have been coerced or incomplete. I've had to rebuild my life from scratch, creating new routines and relationships that don't depend on my previous reputation in the community. I've moved to a smaller house in a different neighborhood where fewer people recognize me, and I've gradually begun to rebuild social connections with people who know the truth about Jessica's false accusations. The experience has taught me about the devastating power of false allegations and the way that social media can amplify lies and destroy innocent people's lives in a matter of hours. It has also shown me the importance of due process and the presumption of innocence, principles that are often forgotten when emotions run high and accusations involve crimes against children. Jessica is currently serving time in prison for drug-related offenses, and we have no contact. While I feel some satisfaction that the truth eventually emerged, I also feel sadness for the daughter I tried so hard to help and who ultimately chose destruction over healing. Her addiction cost her not only her own life and freedom, but also any possibility of having a healthy relationship with a father who loved her. Today, more than a year after Jessica's confession, I'm slowly rebuilding my life and my reputation. While some damage can never be fully repaired, I've found peace in knowing that the truth has been revealed and that people who matter most to me understand my innocence. I've also become an advocate for others who have been falsely accused, working to support due process and protect people from the kind of character assassination that I experienced. The experience has been the most difficult in my life, but it has also taught me about resilience, forgiveness, and the importance of maintaining integrity even when faced with the worst kind of betrayal. While I wouldn't wish this experience on anyone, I've learned that it's possible to survive even the most devastating false accusations and to rebuild a meaningful life based on truth rather than lies. That's my story. How my drug-addicted daughter destroyed my reputation with false allegations of sexual abuse, but how the truth eventually emerged and allowed me to begin rebuilding my life and dignity. Sometimes the most innocent people face the most vicious attacks, but sometimes justice prevails and truth wins out over lies, even when it takes longer than we hope.